Under a full moon, the bell tower tolls with an ominous resonance.
A blonde woman in a bloodstained dress holds an ornate golden bow.
Standing over a corpse, she declares that the woman was never worthy. She expresses her absolute disgust at the thought of her husband's lineage being tainted.
The fallen woman is identified through narration as Lorenza Orietta Raffendora.
The speaker acknowledges that Lorenza was the woman her husband, the Duke, truly loved.
Observing the child, Avery notes he shares her husband's hair and Lorenza's eyes.
Her fist clenches tightly as she realizes she was kept in the bark.
A sudden, heartbreaking wail rings out as the boy discovers his mother's body. She reflects on her ignorance regarding the child's growth and kind nature. She questions how long her husband and Lorenza have shared this secret love. A surge of violet-eyed fury and realization washes over the blonde woman. She yells that even in death, the woman succeeds in agitating her. Her hand trembles as she grips the golden weapon with renewed, lethal intent.
The silver-haired boy breaks into a fit of hysterical, desperate crying.
She looks down at her own stomach, lost in a heavy, silent contemplation. She decides her unborn child must inherit the house instead of the boy. With a cold, steady hand, she draws back her bow to game. The Duke, Aerys, bursts through the door, shouting Avery's full name in horror.
His blue eye widens as he takes in the bloody scene before him.
Seeing the carnage, Aerys cries out for Lorenza in a state of shock.
Avery stares back at him with a chillingly calm and detached expression.
Sweat beads on the Duke's face as he faces the reality of the murder.
She notes with bitterness that he never looks at her with any affection.
Aerys cradles Lorenza's body, mourning the tragedy that has befallen her.
The boy cries out for his mother as the situation descends into chaos. He demands to know how she could commit such a heinous act.
A sharp metallic swing sounds as Aerys slashes Avery with his sword.
She mockingly notes that even he hesitates to kill his own unborn child.
Aerys coldly declares his complete lack of concern for any child they share.
He vows to kill her along with the life she carries. His words leave her stunned, her expression crumbling into pure devastation. She realizes that his feelings for her have always been as cold as water.
Avery collapses onto the floor, the weight of his hatred finally breaking her. She admits her foolishness for not recognizing the depth of their love sooner.
She laments her current powerlessness and the lack of a way forward.
Chained by the ankles, Avery lies defeated on the cold, damp stone.
A single tear falls as she stares into the darkness of her cell.
Her hand rests against the fabric of her dress in a moment of despair. She wonders if everything that happened was truly the result of her faults. She hangs her head, her blonde hair masking her face from the world. The narration shifts to her birth as the prestigious heir of Shubarim. As a baby, she was surrounded by the warmth of her adoring parents. She recalls using her status and beauty to seize whatever her heart desired. She reveals she never cared that others viewed her as a heartless villainess.
Her entire world revolved around her obsession with the man she loved.
A young Aerys is shown, already possessing a gaze of distant, frosty indifference. She admits she forced her way into marriage through pure, obsessive willpower.
Despite his coldness, she clung to the desperate belief that he loved her. She remembers the painful sight of Aerys and Lorenza sharing a genuine, tender moment. Aerys approaches the cell and asks if Avery has finally reflected on her actions.
His gloved hand reaches toward the iron prison bars in a heavy, tense silence.
Avery replies from the darkness, claiming she has reflected from the bottom of her heart. She admits her regret, but warns the Duke not to misunderstand her reasons. Aerys is visibly taken aback by the unexpected shift in her calm tone. Avery bows her head, stating clearly that she regrets her previous life.
She appears radiating a quiet beauty, contrasting the grim reality of the dungeon.
Aerys stares at her, sweat pooling as he struggles to maintain his frosty composure.
He wonders how a woman he considers wicked could ever smile so purely.
The Duke watches her in a daze, momentarily captivated by her peaceful demeanor. He snaps out of the haze, furious at himself for being swayed by her.
A sharp metallic swing rings out as he draws his sword with lethal resolve. He utters her full name as he raises the blade for the final strike.
Chained and defeated, Avery watches calmly as the Duke looms over him.
He formally sentences her to death for her numerous crimes against his house.
Blood splatters as she realizes her life is the price paid for her past.
Her spirit drifts into a sea of red roses as consciousness begins to fade.
She falls into a dark, bottomless abyss as her life is finally extinguished. A violet eye snaps open as she wonders where she has landed. Touching her throat, she vividly recalls the sensation of her neck being cut. She remembers a vision of Aerys calling her by a tender, affectionate nickname. She laments that he never addressed her with such love in her actual life. Avery lets out a terrified scream as she wakes from the vivid nightmare.
Her hand clutches her chest, gasping for air as her heart races wildly.
Her mother immediately pulls her into a warm, deeply comforting embrace.
The two women cling to each other as tears stream down Avery's face.
Averifa weeps against her mother's shoulder, stunned by the reality of her touch. A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as someone calls out to her. A voice asks what is wrong as the luxurious surroundings become clear. She looks up at her mother in disbelief, barely able to whisper a greeting.
Avery realizes she is in an opulent room, not the hell she expected.
She finds herself in an elegant, sunlit drawing room filled with golden light. A shocking realization strikes as she recognizes the interior of Nozenleaf's castle.
She confirms the location she once frequented out of her obsessive love.
She is certain of the setting, finding no way she could be mistaken. A glance in the mirror reveals a significantly younger version of herself.
The impossible truth dawns on her. She has traveled back into the past.
A voice interrupts her thoughts, checking if Lady Shubarim is feeling all right.
She turns to see Aerys' father, Ian, looking at her with genuine concern.
Narrator text identifies the man as Ian Isaac Gadiel da Nozenleafs, the king.
Averifa's eyes widen as she processes the snowy weather outside the castle.
She deduces that this specific, cold situation is one she knows all too well.
She realizes today is the day her engagement to Aerys was first decided.
Ian observes Aerys' return through the window as the snow falls outside.
Her mother notes how unusual it is that Aerys has stopped avoiding Averifa.
Duke Ian suggests they use this perfect timing to discuss the formal engagement. Averifa is frozen in shock as the cycle of her tragedy begins again. She begs her mother to leave immediately, but her mother reminds her they came specifically for the engagement now that the Duke and his son have finally agreed to meet.
Duke Ian watches her with concern, asking if she is truly feeling unwell.
Avery resolves to flee the castle and escape her fate to protect her second life.
Pleading with the Duke of Nozenleafs, Averifa says, "Your Grace, Duke of Nozenleafs, I will be sure to apologize properly another time. So please, I beg you, let me go for now."
Averifa reflects on being granted a second life, vowing not to be driven mad by love again. Looking determined yet weary, she resolves to spend this life living quietly and peacefully.
The late afternoon sun casts long shadows over the many towers of the grand castle.
A formal letter apologizes for her previous rudeness and requests that her engagement be humbly annulled. The written request concludes by asking for forgiveness regarding her perceived selfish behavior.
The document is officially signed by Averifa Rugira Aluaria de Shubarim.
The blonde mother of the household reads the letter with a focused and serious expression. Addressing a nearby servant, the woman with red earrings says, "Come here, please."
A brown-haired attendant bows politely and asks, "You called for me, milady?" Handing him the sealed envelope, she commands, "Take this to the Duke of Nozenleafs at once," and he replies, "As you wish." She insists on the task being done immediately while he begins to voice a separate concern.
Placing a red cloak around Averifa, the attendant notes she spent an entire day traveling back from Nozenleaf's castle.
He gently urges her to rest, saying, "Please, get some proper rest first."
Avery pauses, her expression clouded by the heavy memories of her first life.
She looks back over her shoulder, lost in a moment of silent and heavy contemplation.
Her violet eyes show a flash of anxiety as she prepares to face the future.
Standing alone in her room, Avery steels herself for the difficult conversation ahead. Her mother asks, "You just got home?" And Avery responds, "Yes, let's sit down first."
Sitting across from her daughter, the mother states, "Now then, I think you owe me an explanation."
Averifa hesitates, unsure how to explain her sudden change of heart without revealing the truth. She puts on a radiant, false smile to mask her deep internal distress.
She internally acknowledges that she cannot tell her mother she wants to avoid being killed again.
The attendant silently serves her a hot cup of tea to soothe her nerves. Her mother questions, "Tired of him?" and Averifa answers with a simple and firm yes.
A soft, subtle smile appears on her mother's face as she processes the answer.
To Averifa's surprise, her mother breaks into a light-hearted and supportive fit of giggling. Looking at her daughter with a playful glint, she asks, "Are you really all right with that?"
Her mother validates her, saying, "You're tired of him, aren't you? That's a perfectly good reason. A woman with many loves gets worn out too, you know?"
She casually waves her daughter off, telling her to hurry up and find a new man.
A quick, soft thud sounds as the door closes, leaving Averifa alone with her thoughts.
Avery collapses into a chair, vowing never again to lose her head over a man like that. Dressed in a simple brown gown, she tells her attendant, "I already know that," as he acknowledges her. A servant girl approaches the seated Averifa and asks, "Milady, may I have a moment?" Leaning in close, the girl whispers a confidential message directly into Averifa's ear. The sunlit drawing room remains silent, waiting for the arrival of new news.
A single, sharp tap sounds as a boot steps onto the polished floor.
A messenger in a white uniform salutes Averifa as he prepares to deliver a response.
Handing over a letter, he says, "Yes, milady, I have brought this on behalf of my lord."
Averifa takes the paper, her gaze fixed on the seal as she prepares for the worst. The text in the letter begins with the Duke stating he understands Lady Shubarim's current feelings.
He proposes that instead of canceling the engagement outright, she consider postponing it for a while.
The Duke offers to ignore her previous discourtesy if she agrees to attend Aerys' 18th birthday party. Aery looks up, realizing that escaping her fate will be more difficult than she imagined.
A soft gasp sounds as Avery realizes the trap being laid for her.
Looking at the messenger, she says with a forced calm, "Tell him I humbly accept." She resolves to go to the party and settle the matter clearly right there.
Her final goal is to ensure no bond remains between her and the man who killed her. Avery appears at the event in a stunning blue dress, catching the attention of everyone present.
Standing under a gentle snowfall, Avery reaches out to touch the snout of a massive golden dragon. Guests whisper rumors about Lady Shubaram abandoning her obsession.
Leonard notes this is a chance to approach the successor.
Attendants announce they have been expecting Lady Shubaram's arrival.
A gray-haired officer in a white uniform offers a salute.
The officer introduces himself as Colonel Leonard Bean Fenaria.
Avery recognizes the colonel as Aerys' trusted right-hand man.
Leonard escorts Avery through the falling snow toward the entrance.
Armed guards stand alert as they reach the grand doors. Leonard informs her they have finally reached the main entrance. The heavy doors swing open, flooding the hallway with light.
A professional orchestra plays elegant music for the gathered guests. Noble couples dance gracefully across the polished ballroom floor.
Avery feels a sense of déjà vu at the familiar sight. She recalls the grandeur of Aerys' 18th birthday party.
In her past life, this was their engagement announcement day. Avery stands amidst the crowd, haunted by her previous memories.
The festive atmosphere feels like a gateway to her doom.
A heavy, tired sigh escapes her as she faces reality.
Leonard points out the Duke of Nosenleaf's location nearby.
Putting on a brave face, Avery offers a polite greeting.
She gives a deep curtsy and thanks the Duke. Avery requests to leave immediately, startling the nobleman.
She wonders why her sudden departure is causing such confusion.
Duke Ian encourages her to stay and meet with Aerys.
Avery claims she needs fresh air due to feeling unwell.
She declines the Duke's offer for medical assistance and leaves.
Avery walks away with determination, leaving the ballroom behind.
She travels toward the rocky caves where the dragons reside.
Several large dragons rest peacefully on the cold stone floor.
Avery gasps in amazement at the sight of the creatures. A massive golden dragon gazes back with intelligent blue eyes.
Touching the dragon, she asks who oversees the sable.
A cold, familiar voice calls her full name from behind.
Avery tenses, recognizing the icy tone of her former killer.
A dark silhouette appears at the mouth of the cave. Aerys stands tall in his royal blue and white uniform.
He demands to know what her business is there.
Avery calmly offers her congratulations on his birthday celebration.
Aerys dismisses her pleasantries and demands a real answer.
Avery critiques his lack of manners despite their equal status.
His anger flares as a low, audible grrr sounds.
Avery pulls her arm away with a quick, soft bop.
She internally scolds herself for still feeling a lingering attraction.
Avery reflects on the tragedy of her previous life's end.
She asks for permission to borrow a dragon for transport.
Aerys accuses her of attempting to steal from his house.
Aery is visibly insulted by the Duke's heir's bold accusation. She asks if he is truly calling her a thief.
Avery is disgusted by his arrogant and self-centered attitude.
Aerys is stunned as she turns her back and departs.
Avery turns in surprise as someone calls out her title. Looking toward Leonard, Avery acknowledges the gray-haired colonel's presence.
Approaching him, Avery tells Colonel Leonard Fenario she has been looking for him.
Aery smiles and asks if she may borrow a dragon to return home.
Spotting Aerys with the dragon, Leonard asks why the marshal is there.
Aerys acknowledges Leonard as a startled gasp sounds from nearby.
Aerys asks if it is ready, and Leonard nervously promises to have it immediately.
Leonard and Avery stand before the massive golden dragon's enclosure. Touching the dragon, Avery notes it is Aerys' once-a-year birthday. Avery says she will leave to avoid getting in the way while Aerys watches.
Aerys wonders if she has given up on him for Leonard. Avery vows she will never have to see Aerys again.
Leonard and Avery soar through the starry sky on the golden dragon.
Aery resolves to forget her past and live in peace.
Back at the palace, a man runs down the hall toward Avery.
Avery meets Phoebe, apologizing for calling him over immediately upon her return.
Philly reports that the civil war in the Northern Kingdom has ended.
Avery realizes the rebels won and formed the Strald Empire.
Avery contemplates the beginning of a war she knows is coming.
2 months pass as the geopolitical situation continues to escalate.
The scene shifts to the imposing towers of Winstein Castle.
The 5 divine dukes are summoned to Winstein Castle.
Avery and her mother enter the hall where the dinks wait.
A hand grips a chair as the high-stakes meeting begins.
Duke Ian notes the Shuburams are late, and the Duchess retorts gracefully.
The council represents the 5 divine dukes of the Winstein Empire. The dukes are described as descendants of gods with immense divine power.
House Shubaram represents the Far East, descended from the goddess Aluaria. House Nosenleafs represents the Far North, descended from the god Gadiel.
House Cotillion represents the Far West, descended from the god Oran.
House Graal represents the Far South, descended from the goddess Lyra.
House Arizelda are the nuclear kings, descended from the god Aramis.
An official voice thanks the gathered noble assembly for their patience. Aerys stands among the gathered nobles as the council begins.
Fifth Prince Mindel announces he is attending in the sick emperor's stead.
The Duchess of Shubarim urges the prince to proceed with the meeting.
Prince Mindel brings up the matter of their neighbor, the Strolled Empire.
A tattered red flag signifies the aftermath of the rebel victory.
The Strolled Empire has begun a campaign to subjugate neighboring nations.
The prince identifies these actions as a clear declaration of war.
Mindel declares that as royalty, he cannot simply stand by. The Duke of Grawl asks what the prince intends to do.
Mindel plans to leak false info about Nozenleaf's defenses to provoke war.
The Duke of Arizelda reacts with visible shock to the risky plan.
The prince intends to completely crush the enemy once they are lured.
The Duchess of Cotillion questions the feasibility of the prince's strategy.
Mindel aims to circulate rumors of another war to manipulate the enemy. Duke Ian listens intently with a serious and focused expression.
Duchess Shubarim asks who truly devised the plan, the Emperor or Mindelt.
The green-haired Duchess accuses the prince of using them for succession.
Fifth Prince Mindel stands over the table while the noblemen watch him intently.
Averfa asks Prince Mindel if he is finding the topic difficult to discuss.
Mindel sweats, stating when the first prince becomes emperor, he plans to seize power.
The blonde prince looks visibly distressed by the impending royal succession.
A sharp, sudden gasp sounds as Averfa and her mother meact.
Aerys watches with a cool gaze, claiming the prince must be exaggerating the situation.
A dark screen notes that these grim outcomes are only possibilities.
Records show the first prince has spent years researching the gods to gather evidence.
He plans to use that information against the dukes to have them executed.
The Duchess says they must stand behind Mindelt, who promises to abide by their decision.
Duchess Shubarim asks if anyone objects to choosing survival over their own certain destruction.
Mindel offers a bright, relieved smile after securing the Duchess's support. Bowing deeply, Mindel says, "Thank you, I am truly grateful from the bottom of my heart."
Avery Fall walks alone down the long, empty hall of the castle.
Mindel says he cannot thank her enough, but Averyfa insists she did nothing.
As Averyfa tries to excuse herself, the prince desperately cries out for her to wait.
Both characters turn in surprise as another figure approaches them in the hallway.
A stern voice warns that their presence together will cause scandalous rumors. Aerys approaches, telling Mindel to be more aware that he will one day be crown prince.
Mindel takes his leave, bowing to the silver-haired marshal and the young noblewoman. Averyfa and Aerys watch as the prince hurries away down the carpet.
An awkward, heavy silence falls between the two remaining in the hall.
Averyfa looks away, thinking about how ridiculous the entire situation has become.
Looking angry, Aery steps closer and demands to know what she is after.
Averyfa turns her head with a look of pure, unadulterated annoyance.
Aerys questions if things are fine already despite all her past outrageous behavior.
He asks if she thinks her actions can be forgiven with such a flippant excuse. Averyfa bows, offering to apologize for everything to satisfy the heir's wishes.
She maintains a neutral expression, hiding her inner thoughts from the man. Looking at her, Aerys says, "I see," with a calm and thoughtful expression. Averyfa resolves to remain prepared for whatever punishment or consequence follows next. Averyfa tells him she will accept any punishment as long as it is not death.
A subtle, satisfied smirk plays across Aerys's face as he watches her.
Averyfa blushes and wonders if she just said something completely outrageous to him.
A quick, heavy thump sounds as she reaffirms her desire to stay alive.
Looking directly at her, Aerys's eyes narrow slightly as he says,
"All right." Aerys announces a mission from the Emperor and tells her she is coming with him.
Averyfa looks at him with surprise, thinking to herself, that's all it is?
Birds fly over quiet city streets as the sun begins to set.
Now in commoner attire, Aerys and Averyfa walk through the cobblestone streets.
A quick light scuff sounds as Aerys stops and announces, "Here we are." Looking at the building, the blonde noblewoman asks with uncertainty, "Here?"
A simple multi-story inn stands before them as commoners walk past.
Realizing it is a love hotel, she is stunned as Aerys tells her to use his name.
A loud, sharp creak sounds as the heavy doors are pushed open.
Averyfa wonders why he brought her to such a place for an Imperial mission.
She recalls Aerys explaining that this investigation is about the illegal trade of slaves.
Aerys says slave traders operate out of an inn basement in the Imperial capital.
He explains that the trader only guides nobles who are looking to buy slaves.
Averyfa asks why they are dressed as lower-ranking nobles if they only sell to nobles.
Aerys explains high-status nobles use disguises to visit secret places with lovers. Averyfa reflects on their investigation and the irony of pretending to be lovers.
The innkeeper welcomes the couple and asks if it is their first visit.
Aerys expresses his desire to see the goods while Averyfa watches.
The bald merchant looks intently at the couple with a serious expression.
The man agrees and prepares to lead them into the basement. Averyfa and Aerys follow the innkeeper down a set of stone stairs. Aerys asks about the source of the slaves and the man details their origins.
Averyfa is disturbed as she considers the auctions mentioned by the merchant.
The merchant explains that many nobles utilize slaves from these fresh auctions.
Ares asks for the strongest slave, and the merchant leads them further.
A heavy chain rattles as the merchant pulls a slave forward.
Avery recognizes the black-haired slave as Lynn from her previous life.
Avery recalls Lynn's history as Aerys' subordinate and a slave soldier. Avery reflects on the unexpected reunion with Lynn in this life.
A cup sits beside an open book where the name Lynn is written.
Avery sits in a garden with Lynn, commenting on his lovely name.
Avery reflects that Lynn was once Aerys' right-hand mare.
A close-up shows Avery looking thoughtfully at Lynn during their garden meeting.
Lynn explains that he originates from the royal family of Yamato.
Lynn notes he is a bastard child, so his royalty is questionable. Avery looks down with realization as she listens to his backstory. Avery and Lynn walk through a lush garden together.
Lynn notes that they share a unique understanding due to their royal backgrounds.
Aerys declares his intention to purchase the man immediately.
The merchant prepares the contract while Ares makes a broader demand for slaves.
Ares points his sword at the merchant, demanding to know his identity.
Small ice crystals shatter on the ground as Aerys' divine power flares. Ares places the merchant under arrest for violating anti-slavery laws.
Aery stands with his sword drawn as the merchant reacts in shock.
The merchant falls to the ground, terrified by Aerys' sudden show of force.
Ares dismisses the merchant's questions, noting that his identity will soon be irrelevant.
Avery approaches Lynn in his cell, introducing herself to him formally.
Lynn looks up with shock and confusion as Avery speaks him.
Avery gently takes Lynn's hand and reassures him that he is safe.
Avery asks Aerys to let her take Lynn into her service.
Avery mentions her father's royal Yamato blood to claim a connection.
Avery insists they are relatives and tells Lynn not to doubt her.
Aerys shatters the chains with his sword and asks for Lynn's name.
Lynn asks how she knows his name. Avery repeats they are relatives.
Avery makes Lynn her subordinate. He reacts with surprise. Avery presents herself as one of the 5 divine dukes.
Aerys shakes Lynn's hand, welcoming him to House Nosenlees. Avery sits quietly in a chair, appearing deep in thought. Avery apologizes to her mother and asks her to repeat her words.
The Duchess of Shubarim sits across from her daughter.
The Duchess comments on Avery's frequent spacing out lately. She mentions receiving a confidential letter from the 5th Prince.
Avery holds the envelope as she prepares to read the prince's message.
The scroll opens, offering a formal greeting to the Duke and Avery.
A floating scroll contains a message regarding the approved royal strategy.
The message continues with a request written by the prince's pen.
Avery reads a specific request for Duchess Shubarim to visit Dadak.
Avery holds the sealed letter with a visibly troubled and weary expression. She wonders about the true meaning behind the prince's sudden request.
Avery reads the invitation for Lady Shubarim to stay at Nosenleaf's castle.
Looking shocked, Avery questions the meaning behind the prince's specific instructions.
She recalls Prince Mindelt's plan to use false information to trigger war. Avery realizes that visiting the ducal castle now is entering a battlefield. A soft white feather drifts through a clear, pale blue sky. Avery and Ares fly toward the far north atop a golden dragon.
They arrive at the towering spires of the grand Nosenleaf's ducal castle. Ares greets them upon arrival, standing before his subordinates in the courtyard.
The golden dragon nuzzles Avery's head as she stands there in silence.
Avery's gaze narrows as she recognizes a familiar face among the guards.
Spotting the black-haired knight, Avery calls out to Lynn with great surprise.
A soft scuff sounds as Avery asks Lynn if he still remembers her.
Lynn stares back at the blonde noblewoman and softly utters her name.
A sharp breath sounds as Aerys watches the quiet interaction with displeasure.
Aerys scolds Leonard for allowing Lynn to use Avery's name so informally.
Avery defends Lynn, explaining she requested he call her by her name. Avery notes that being called Rifa beats being called you or Air.
A weary sigh sounds as Aerys exhales in response to her explanation.
Ares looks thoughtful, realizing he is also expected to use her name.
Avery touches Lynn's shoulder and forbids Ares from using her first name.
A tense, awkward silence falls over the entire group in the courtyard.
Leonard breaks the tension by shouting, "Anyway!" with a visibly flustered look.
Ares questions her presence, then notes he personally attends to honored guests. A quiet scuff sounds as they walk toward a separate palace building.
Avery stops and stares in shock at her assigned living quarters. Looking out a window, Avery realizes she is at the Duchess's residence. Narrative text confirms this building is the official residence of the Duchess.
Avery recalls Aerys' mother, who once lived in this very sacred place.
She reflects on living here as Aerys' wife in her first life. Gazing at a candelabra, Avery dreads returning to this specific place again.
Avery calls the place too grand and requests a normal guest room. A thought bubble notes that only the Duchess may reside here.
Ares argues that an ordinary room would damage the dignity of his house.
Avery warns that staying here will lead people to misunderstand her styles.
Aerys turns away, declaring she will stay there regardless of the rumors.
Avery smiles, thinking to herself that Ares is as selfish as ever. She considers that if guest rooms are out, she has another idea.
Avery recalls the dark place where she was executed long ago.
Avery suggests staying in the underground prison to suit her villainous role.
A quick heavy stop sounds as Aerys halts his walk-in suck. Turning back, Aerys asks how she knows the southern prison's specific location. Avery remains silent, her face showing a hint of nervous tension.
Avery asks if the castle houses other similar places within its walls.
A light tap sounds as Aery stares at her with deep suspicion.
Avery smiles serenely, telling Aerys not to make such a frightening face.
Avery turns to leave, yielding to Aerys' firm insistence.
Aerys watches her walk away with a silent, pensive expression.
Looking in the mirror, Avery dreads sleeping in this runaben.
The room triggers nightmares of her first life's most horrible day.
She steels herself to focus only on the coming Imperial battle.
A report details false rumors regarding House Nozenleaf's military movements.
Rumors spread that the battle in the south is failing miserably. Gossip claims the ducal heir has already abandoned the castle defenses.
Avery realizes the Strahd Empire will soon attack the ducal castle.
The ticking clock signals that she must plan their strategy immediately.
Avery walks down a dark castle corridor alone at night. A sudden voice commands her to stop before the castle spires.
Her hand grips the lantern tightly as she is barred from passing.
Avery demands to be let through, her expression hardening with resolve.
The maid explains that Aerys forbade anyone from entering this area.
Avery wonders if Aerys is hiding a secret person from her. The maid looks nervous, unable to fully explain the situation.
Dismissing the secrecy, Avery pushes past to focus on the war. A frantic call for Lady Shubarim echoes as she keeps walking.
Colonel Fenario appears, looking incredibly flustered and out of breath.
Avery pauses, staring at the gray-haired officer with intense curiosity.
She asks the colonel why he is so visibly distressed and panicked.
The colonel sweats as he prepares to deliver some urgent news.
Official word arrives that the Strahd Empire has mobilized its forces. Avery looks stunned as she processes the sudden move for war. Her grip on the lantern handle tightens as her anxiety grows. A quick soft scuff sounds as she rushes away to take action.
The pale night sky stretches over the castle's high ramparts.
In the courtyard, Avery refuses to comply with Aerys' travel plan.
She questions riding his dragon while he dismisses her complaints.
Aerys cuts the argument short, declaring that they are leaving now.
He reaches out his gloved hand to guide her onto the beast.
They hold hands under the stars as they prepare to depart. A dainty teal-colored shoe steps onto the stone path nearby. Avery looks over in surprise at the sudden, unexpected visitor.
A brunette girl suddenly rushes forward and hugs Aerys from behind.
Avery's eyes widen in absolute shock at the girl's sudden presence.
Narrative text identifies the woman as Lorenza, whom Avery once killed. The brunette woman clings to Aerys with a look of deep affection.
Lorenza's name appears, noted as the woman who once bore Aerys' child.
Avery recalls killing Aerys' former lover with an arrow long ago.
She is horrified to see her rival standing alive before her.
The woman smiles warmly while leaning her head against Aerys' shoulder.
A sharp, painful thump sounds as Avery clutches her chest in agony. Aerys orders the woman away, but she begs to be taken alone.
Lorenza pleads tearfully, desperate not to be separated from him.
Avery watches the intimate display from across the snowy courtyard.
She reflects on her own foolishness for ignoring their past bond.
Her heart sinks, realizing she can no longer even weep for him.
Lorenza promises to stay out of the way if she can stay.
Lorenza's eyes widen in absolute shock at Avery's sudden arrival.
Lorenza clings to Aerys as a quick swoosh sounds nearby.
Avery tells Lorenza that it's fine and asks her to go on.
Aery scratches his head awkwardly while Lorenza remains visibly distressed.
Avery acknowledges their tearful farewell, noting it is hard to see a lover off to battle.
Aery sternly clarifies that Lorenza is not his lover.
Lorenza declares she is not his lover and will be going with him, as Avery acknowledges her.
Avery smiles as she realizes Lorenza is essentially choosing to die. A voice urges the heir to leave, noting they'll never depart if he keeps fussing. Aerys repeats that she is not his lover, while Avery announces she is heading out. Lorenza begs him to come back safely, and he agrees. A powerful flutter sounds as they mount the white dragon to depart.
The massive white dragon soars high above the snow-covered castle grounds. A long, whistling wind sounds as they fly through the night sky.
A thought bubble notes that his supposed lover is quite a handful. Aerys asks how many times he must say she is only a childhood friend.
Avery accepts his word but reflects that the two of them will eventually develop love.
Narrative text states they will one day nurture a love so deep. Narrative text explains that their love will give life to a child. Aerys notes the night wind is getting stronger and tells her to hold on firmly.
Avery refuses, shouting she would rather fall than do something like that. Aerys tells her to just hold on as she asks why in surprise.
Avery wonders why he's being so kind to her now of all times.
Avery reflects that his kindness will only make her feel even more foolish. A voice confirms that camp was successfully set before dawn thanks to everyone's efforts. Aerys thanks his troops, warning that the enemy army will reach them by morning.
The soldiers salute and shout their confirmation to follow his orders.
Averyfa walks through the camp with a look of cold determination.
The morning sun rises over the horizon of the upcoming battlefield.
Avery prepares herself mentally for the start of the conflict.
Aerys watches the horizon, his face set for the war ahead.
Narrative text emphasizes that this situation is a real war, not a game.
Averyfa enters her private quarters to rest before the battle begins.
Narrative text recalls Aerys leading the army against the Strahd Empire in her first life.
Averyfa remembers the victory Aerys achieved when the Empire became territory.
Averyfa worries if her presence in this battle will change something important.
A soft, drowsy breath sounds as Averyfa begins to drift off.
Averyfa wakes suddenly and asks what is happening outside her tent.
Aerys appears at the entrance and asks her to come with him.
Averyfa asks what they are doing, noting she would like some rest.
A soft clink sounds as a gloved hand places a glass.
Aerys looks down at Averyfa and tells her to croak.
Aerys stands before Averyfa, presenting her with a mysterious beverage.
Aerys firmly repeats his order for her to drink the liquid.
Looking down, Averyfa asks about the nature of the provided medicines. Averyfa stares at Aerys with a look of growing suspicion.
Aerys explains it is a tranquilizer, an essential medicine for soldiers heading into war.
Narrative text describes the fate of soldiers who lose their minds and take their lives. Averyfa acknowledges the necessity of tranquilizers but remains deeply hesitant.
Avery flatly refuses the medicine, maintaining her sharp focus for the war.
Aerys warns her that acting tough on a battlefield is a death sentence.
Averyfa coldly insists that she is not putting on a front.
Avery recalls her past experiences and refuses the provided medicine once again.
A sudden wet splosh sounds as the medicine is tossed aside.
Aerys wipes his damp hair in stunned silence as the liquid drips.
Aerys clarifies that his intention was never to insult her pride.
Averyfa skeptically demands to know what he was actually trying to achieve.
Aerys hesitates, unable to find the words to explain his sudden concern.
Aery stands surrounded by flowers, blushing as he struggles with his feelings.
Averyfa is completely bewildered, wondering if Aerys is truly worried about her.
Averyfa dismisses the conversation and decides to return to her own tent.
A quick, firm snatch sounds as Aerys suddenly grabs her wrist.
Aerys stares at her with a heavy, serious gaze that demands attention.
Averyfa looks back with a flush of shock on her face. A sharp snap sounds as Averyfa pulls her hand away from him.
Averyfa warns him that she isn't as fragile as his former lover.
Averyfa retreats from the tent while Aerys watches her walk away silently.
The morning sun breaks over the peaks as the war finally begins.
Averyfa stands ready with the Imperial troops as the conflict draws near.
Aerys rallies his men, swearing to achieve total victory for the Empire.
Aerys brandishes his sword and commands his forces to charge the army.
A thunderous roar sounds as the soldiers raise their blades in unison.
The two massive armies collide in a chaotic and bloody clash.
Averyfa pulls back the string of a massive, ornate golden bow.
She releases a magical arrow, shouting for it to fly high. A long whistling shh sounds as a rain of light descends.
A sequence of heavy thumps sound as enemy soldiers fall in droves.
Aerys carves through the battlefield while shards of ice fly around him.
Imperial soldiers surge forward, shouting battle cries as they advance through the west.
Averyfa observes the ongoing carnage from a high vantage point.
A sudden, sharp gulp sounds as a man behind her reacts. A clatter sounds as a bloody blade falls to the dusty ground.
A heavy whack sounds as Averyfa is suddenly struck from hand.
Averyfa collapses to the ground, losing consciousness as her vision fades.
She spots the traitor's blood-stained uniform before everything goes completely dark.
Averyfa groans softly, a low sounding as she starts to wake.
A sharp zap sounds as she winces from a stinging headache. A rough creak sounds as Averyfa realizes her arms are bound.
Averyfa lies helpless on the floor, unable to break free of her bonds.
Recalling the man in the uniform, she realizes a traitor exists.
A soft step sounds as a voice notes that she is finally awake.
The intruder is revealed as Silhouette Grandi Strahd, the enemy emperor.
Narrative text identifies him as the dangerous leader of the rebel army. Sewelt lifts her chin, remarking that her beauty exceeds the rumors.
Averyfa meets his gaze with cold, silent defiance despite her predicament.
Silwell taunts her, explaining that the entire battle was merely a trap.
Silwell admits he wanted to see the beauty of House Shubarim himself.
Averyfa laughs coldly, calling the enemy emperor a massive fool.
A soft slide sounds as Sewelt begins to untie her hair ribbon. Averyfa glares at her captor, inwardly plotting how she will kill him. Sewelt commands the bound Averyfa to become his woman.
Averyfa looks up with a flush of shock on her face.
Avery flatly dismisses the emperor's proposal as complete nonsense.
Sewell praises Averyfa's defiant look and enticing attitude.
Sewelt looms over Averyfa as he pins her down. Averyfa feels her captor's hand as she plots her escape.
Sewell continues to pin her down with a devious smile.
The enemy emperor begins to untie Averyfa's hair ribbon. A soldier rushes in, urgently apologizing for the sudden intrusion. Sewell demands the news, annoyed by the ill-timed interruption. The soldier reports that the Nosenleaf's army broke the lines.
Seawalt notes that the enemy's attack arrived sooner than expected.
Seawalt pulls Aery closer, clutching her chin once more.
Aery determines to flee before a hand muffles her. A dark-haired man suddenly restrains her, covering her mouth.
The man whispers Aery's name to calm her down.
He quickly cuts the ropes binding Aery's arms.
The dark-haired savior looks at her with concern.
Avery leans into her rescuer, finally feeling a moment's relief.
He firmly promises to get her out of the tent.
He keeps a watchful eye through a gap in the fabric.
The man urges her to leave while they still can.
Fleeing soldiers shout that the Nosenleaf's army is too strong.
The group flees through a narrow valley as the sun rises.
Aery wonders about the strange sight appearing before her.
She is stunned to see shards of ice floating nearby.
The entire battlefield stands frozen in a massive ice graveyard.
Aery realizes with horror that everything around her is frozen. A frozen soldier shatters into pieces on the cold ground. A sharp metallic click sounds as a sword is gripped.
Aerys stands amidst the ice, confirmed as the source.
Avery stares out over the horrific frozen landscape.
She reflects on the cruel beauty of Aerys's destructive power. Colonel Fenario offers Aery a drink, relieved she is safe.
Aery acknowledges the green-haired colonel as she takes the drink.
She wonders if Aerys's divine power was always this overwhelming.
Colonel Fenario informs Aery that he has more caught.
He explains that a traitor infiltrated their ranks months ago.
The colonel sincerely apologizes for failing to catch the spy.
Avery tells him not to worry about the oversight.
Fenario reports that the traitor was executed after being interrogated.
The sound of footsteps on the dusty ground marks their path.
Aery looks at the traitor's body hanging from the ballast.
A guard harshly orders a prisoner to walk poverly.
Aery walks alongside Colonel Fenario through the keck.
The defeated Emperor Seawalt is led away in heavy ropes.
Ares notes that the Emperor's battlefield presence simplified their victory.
Seawalt lies on the ground, glare fixed on his captors. The bound Emperor asks Ares if he intends to kill him.
Avifa considers the political implications of Aerys kills the Emperor.
Ares stands before the bound captive, stating that the commanding prince should be present for the execution.
As he prepares to ask a final question, narrative text wonders if Ares truly intends to kill the Emperor.
Ares questions why the enemy attacked even though their own spy warned them that the war was a trap.
Seawalt admits his goal was to kidnap the daughter of House Shubarim, much to Aerys's visible shock.
The bound emperor claims Aery is a valuable bargaining chip and a woman worthy of being his.
A lethal, uncontrollable rage fills Aerys's eyes as he glares down at the defiant prisoner. Ares lets out a thunderous, blood-chilling roar of insult as his fury finally boils over.
The oppressive darkness of Aerys's aura begins to fade as he prepares to unleash his power.
Aery swings his massive blade with terrifying force, sending shards of ice flying through the air.
A sharp, cold intensity fills the air as Ares delivers a powerful strike amidst a storm of frost. Ares shouts another furious insult as he continues his relentless, rage-fueled assault on the captive. Ice crystals shatter and fly in all directions as Ares pours his divine strength into another swing.
A sudden, sharp metallic ring sounds as an arrow strikes Aerys's blade and deflects his killing blow.
Ares's face is frozen in shock as he realizes his strike was just forcibly interrupted.
Aery stands tall and resolute, clutching her ornate golden bow after saving the enemy emperor's life.
Standing between the two men, Aery is questioned by a bewildered Ares about why she stopped him.
Avery warns Ares to calm down, explaining the political catastrophe that would follow the emperor's immediate death.
She begs him to sheathe his sword as she reflects on how long it has been since his last outburst. A flashback reveals Aery in a blood-stained gown standing amidst carnage with her golden bow. She vividly recalls the dark day she took another woman's life with a single lethal arrow.
The captured emperor begins to speak, his gaze fixed on the woman who just intervened.
He explains that his grand ambition required the beauty of House Shubarim standing there to achieve success.
Aerys harshly dismisses the prisoner's claims as nothing more than a series of pathetic late-stage excuses.
Seawalt asks that if he is to be killed, Ares at least promise peace for his empire.
Ares orders Colonel Fenario to watch the prisoner before turning his back and walking away.
A messenger rushes into the area to announce the arrival of His Highness the Fifth Prince.
The blonde prince bows low to Avery, expressing his profound gratitude to both her and Ares for the victory.
Aery advises the future crown prince that he should not bow his head so easily to others.
The fifth prince offers a gentle smile and concedes that her assessment of royal conduct is correct.
Inside the tent, Ares formally requests the prince's permission to execute the Emperor of Strahd at once.
The fifth prince remains silent and thoughtful as he weighs the request against his own observations.
Narrative text explains the prince recently spoke with Seawalt, assuming he would be a savage brute.
The prince recalls Seawalt's noble ambition to build a great nation entirely free from poverty.
Seawalt's resolve to risk his life for the greatness of the Strahd Empire left a deep impression.
The fifth prince asks Aerys and Arefa if they also recognize the genuine conviction in the Emperor's eyes. He suggests that reforming Sewell and bringing him under their banner is more beneficial than execution.
Narrative text reveals that Sewell is actually the bastard son of the late king of Ashrel. Aerys watches as the prince explains that the captive emperor enjoys strong support from his people.
The prince notes that Sewell's care for those of low birth makes him a valuable potential ally.
He makes a final appeal to give the fallen leader a single chance to prove himself.
Aerys reluctantly yields to the prince's decision, accepting the stay of execution for the time being.
However, he adds a lethal warning that any future betrayal will result in immediate consequences.
Aerys privately determines to drag the Strahd Empire down in his own way if things go wrong.
The fifth prince acknowledges the grim condition with a serious and understanding nod.
Aeryfa announces her intention to go and have another direct conversation with the Emperor of Strahd.
The prince offers to escort her as the group leaves the meeting tent together.
A heavy, expectant silence fills the room as Aeryfa and Aerys sit alone at the table.
A quick, soft tap sounds as Aeryfa stands to leave, only for Aerys to suddenly snatch her arm.
Aerys demands to know exactly what the Emperor did to her during her short time in captivity.
Aeryfa insists nothing happened, but Aerys sternly warns her not to even think about lying to him.
Aeryfa winces as Aerys grips her arm, telling him that he is hurting her.
A sharp, pained gasp escapes Aeryfa as she tries to endure the heir's grip.
Aerys releases his hold on Aeryfa's arm as she draws back from him in tan.
Aeryfa apologizes for pulling away, noting how hard he was gripping her, while a regretful Aerys quietly apologizes.
Avery tells him it is fine while inwardly reeling from the shock that he actually apologized.
Looking away, Aerys asks Aeryfa to begin calling him by his name from now on. Aerys stands amidst a field of blue flowers, looking pensive as he requests a more personal connection.
Aeryfa's heart thuds in her chest as she looks at Aerys with a deeply flushed face.
Avery thinks about Aerys letting her use his name and how he is closing the distance between them. Her heart continues to race as she focuses on the dramatic change in his behavior.
Aeryfa marvels at how differently Aerys is acting compared to his conduct in her first life.
A sudden realization dawns in Aeryfa's eyes as she processes her conflicted and growing feelings.
Aeryfa huffs and turns away, declaring that it is finally time for them to go home.
Aerys watches silently as Aeryfa strides out of the tent toward the camp's exit.
Narrative text explains that the Strahd Empire became a kingdom under the protection of the Winstein Empire. The blonde fifth prince notes that the kingdom of Strahd joining as an ally strengthens them greatly.
Narrative text expresses the collective hope to build a better nation together after the war.
The fifth prince shakes hands with the kneeling Sewell to formally finalize their new political alliance.
Aeryfa asks the group and Aerys if they should finally begin their return home.
Aerys looks back at her and offers a quiet agreement as they prepare to depart.
Sewell calls out Aeryfa's name as she and Aerys begin to walk away together.
The captured former emperor asks Aeryfa if she is really leaving so soon after their meeting.
Aeryfa confirms that their work is done and continues her exit without looking back at him.
Sewell asks why Aeryfa doesn't just come to Strahd with him instead of leaving.
A sharp, confused shout of shock comes from Aeryfa as she reacts to Sewell's bold suggestion. Sewell claims she could be the queen of Strahd, but Aeryfa dismisses the offer as completely insulting.
Sewell kneels and takes Aeryfa's hand, causing her to blush in extreme frustration and disbelief.
Aerys grips his sword hilt, privately noting that he really should kill Sewell right where he stands.
Sewell is visibly confused by the hostile reaction to what he considers a genuine offer.
Aeryfa watches the tension, realizing how much the heir is struggling to keep his temper.
Aeryfa and Aerys stand before the massive blue dragon they will use for their travel.
Aeryfa climbs onto the dragon's back, surrounded by a faint and shimmering glowing light.
Aerys stares coldly at the ground while helping Aeryfa secure her seat on the dragon.
The giant blue dragon takes flight, soaring high into the sky with Aerys and Aeryfa.
Sewell stands alone on the dusty ground, watching the dragon disappear into the far horizon.
Confetti falls as a dense crowd of citizens celebrates the army's return in the city streets. A brown-haired woman calls out to Aerys as the group arrives back at the palace.
The woman throwing her arms around Aerys in a tight, affectionate embrace is revealed as Lorenza.
Aerys stands stiffly as the brown-haired Lorenza clings to him with a happy, excited smile.
Lorenza looks up at Aerys with an adoring expression as she continues to hold him tight.
The black-haired guard and the green-haired colonel watch the reunion with mixed and awkward expressions.
Aerys is visibly flustered and tells Lorenza that she is spouting complete and total nonsense. Lorenza insists it is not nonsense and demands that Aerys hug her back right this instant.
A soft, weary sigh escapes Aeryfa as she watches the intimate interaction from the side.
Aeryfa tells the colonel she is tired and will head back to her room alone first.
Aeryfa turns her back on the group and begins walking down the long palace hallway.
Aerys remains behind with Lorenza as Aeryfa walks away, her figure retreating into the distance.
A rhythmic tap sounds as Aeryfa reflects on the pain of seeing Aerys and Lorenza talk together.
Aeryfa thinks she never would have loved Aerys if she'd known it would end this way. Avery Fa recalls a painful memory of Aerys with Lorenza and a child in her past life.
Avery vividly recalls Aerys' betrayal and the lethal pain he once caused.
A soft escapes Avery Fall as she watches Aerys walk away again. Avery Fall looks back with a firm and deeply determined facial expression.
Lorenza asks the blonde woman if she truly loves the silver-haired heir.
The brown-haired woman asks Avrifa if she has feelings for Aerys.
Avrifa replies that Aerys no longer matters to her after everything happened.
Lorenza stares at her rival with a cold and intensely calculating gaze. Lorenza warns Avrifa not to mistake Aerys' temporary fondness for true love.
Lorenza smugly declares that she is the only woman Aerys truly loves.
Avery finds the other woman's bold and desperate claims to be ridiculous.
Avery tells both Aerys and Lorenza that they are incredibly arrogant.
A look of genuine shock crosses the brown-haired woman's stunned face.
Avrifa walks away while mockingly noting how perfect the pair is together. Avrifa places a steady hand on the shoulder of the stunned Lorenza. Avrifa warns Lorenza that she is the one getting far too carried away. She tells Lorenza to be careful about pushing her luck any further.
A soft crunch sounds as Avrifa destroys the small flowers in her hand.
Avrifa warns that an angry goddess might pierce Lorenza's precious heart soon. Avrifa smiles while stating she has no desire to separate the lovers. Avrifa walks away while wondering if the heir's heart has already strayed. Avrifa reflects on how different her interactions with Lorenza are this time.
She recalls the throne room where she once killed her brown-haired rival.
Avrifa remembers that Lorenza never appeared during her first life's royal marriage. Avrifa realizes that Aerys and Lorenza's past love left no room for her.
Avrifa huffs a soft breath while calling herself a pathetic and weak woman.
She walks alone through the palace hallway while lost in bitter thoughts. Avrifa's heart still shakes at the thought of their love as she passes. Avrifa resolves to never let herself love the silver-haired heir ever again.
Standing in her quiet room, Avrifa decides to open a bottle of wine.
Avrifa hopes to soon be free from the oppressive and detestable palace room. Avrifa sits on the sofa while becoming increasingly intoxicated as she drinks. She decides on just one more drink as she struggles to stand up. A sharp kaya escapes Avrifa as she loses her balance and falls.
A silver-haired man catches the drunken Avrifa before she hits the floor.
Aerys tells the blonde woman that she has had more than enough. Aerys pulls Avrifa into a firm and protective embrace against his chest. Avrifa is completely stunned to find Aerys inside her private palace room. Avrifa quickly pulls away from Aerys as she tries to steady herself.
Avrifa sits back on the sofa while staring at Aerys with wide eyes.
She asks the heir exactly what he wants with her tonight. A heavy and weary sigh escapes Aerys as he looks at the ground.
Aerys walks toward the seated woman as long shadows fill the room.
Aerys hands her water while advising her to sober up for the celebration.
Aerys sits beside Avrifa while surprising her with his sudden and close proximity.
A blushing Avrifa stammers as she asks Aerys why he is doing this.
Avrifa looks away from the heir with a pained and conflicted expression.
Aerys explains he wants her side of the story regarding Lorenza's accusations.
Avrifa drinks water while Lorenza went crying to him after starting trouble. Aerys asks the blonde woman exactly what she means by her claim. Avrifa drifts off to sleep against Aerys' shoulder in the quiet room. Aerys watches the sleeping Avrifa with a heavy and pensive gaze as a soft escapes her lips. The silver-haired man reaches out to gently stroke her hair as she sleeps.
Aerys lifts Avrifa into his arms and quietly whispers a wish for her to have sweet dreams.
Aerys carefully tucks Avrifa into her bed while pulling the white covers over her.
Aerys looks down at her one last time with a blushing, conflicted face. Avrifa stirs slightly as Aerys holds her hand before finally letting go.
Aerys lingers at her bedside while looking back at her with a silent and longing expression.
Aerys quietly steps out of the room while keeping his eyes on the sleeping woman. A soft thud sounds as Aerys pulls the bedroom doors closed.
Narrative text reflects Avrifa's confusion as she wonders what this situation is supposed to mean.
Avery Lifa stands in a stunning white off-the-shoulder gown while looking visibly annoyed. The maid informs Avrifa that Confrontation and Lord Lyn are here, and Avrifa tells her to show them in.
A rhythmic topping sounds as the two men walk across the stone floor.
The green-haired colonel and the black-haired Lyn enter the room and stop in their tracks, visibly stunned. Colonel Fenario and Lord Lyn stand in a daze while struggling to find words.
Avery Foss stands with her back turned as her long blonde hair flows over the white dress. Narrative text explains that Avrifa cannot find it in herself to blame them for being speechless.
Avrifa asks if the dress is okay, and the blushing colonel shouts a frantic and enthusiastic yes!
Avrifa wonders if the person who chose the dress is here yet. The colonel stammers and looks away, finding it difficult to answer her question. Decorative text reveals that the one who selected the dress was the marshal.
Avrifa stares blankly into the distance as she processes the shocking information. Avrifa wonders if he is an idiot, while the colonel admits he has no idea what the marshal is thinking.
Avrifa huffs a tired breath as she prepares for the evening had.
Lord Lyn steps forward and offers his gloved hand to Avrifa.
Avrifa looks up at the stoic guard as he prepares to leave her app.
Avrifa asks Lyn to escort her again so she can avoid falling this time.
Avery Fall walks down the red-carpeted hallway between Lynn and the Colonel.
Aery stands in the corridor wearing a blue cape while coldly noting that she is late.
Aerys stares at the pair while remarking that Lynn and Avery seem awfully close.
Avery offers a brief apology while Aerys watches her with a sharp and jealous gaze.
Aerys asks if she likes it, but Avery retorts that the dress's meaning is the real point.
Avery looks at him with disbelief and asks if he is actually being serious right now. Avery gestures to her white gown while stating that dressed like this, she stands out far too much.
Avery looks down at the white fabric of her elegant dress.
Aerys blushes and finishes her thought, noting that she looks just like she's going to a wedding.
Aerys insists he likes her appearance, but Avery worries about the strange rumors they are inviting.
Aerys grabs her hand while declaring that they have no more time to argue.
Avery tells Aerys to wait as he leads her into the bright and crowded ballroom. Onlookers blush and whisper about how truly beautiful the couple looks together.
Avery sighs as she is forced to walk beside the stoic, silver-haired heir.
Avery notices Lorenza standing among the guests with a look of pure shock.
Avery looks back at a fuming Lorenza who glares at her with intense jealousy and hatred.
Lorenza huffs and turns away from the scene in a fit of rage.
Aerys holds out his hand and tells Avery to come on.
The couple stands in the center of the grand hall as the other guests watch.
Musical notes drift through the air as Aerys and Avery begin a formal waltz.
Aerys gazes intently into Avery's eyes as they dance together.
An overhead view shows the pair spinning gracefully amidst the colorful dresses of the guests.
Aerys dips Avery low during their dance as flower petals fall around them.
Onlookers clap and cheer as the beautiful couple enters the hall.
Avery feels a sense of unease as she notes she is not used to being applauded. Aerys waves to the guests as he leads the blonde woman through the grand ballroom.
A look of quiet hesitation crosses Avery face as the celebration continues around them.
Aerys asks if she will be all right on her own, and she simply replies with a short, sure.
Avery walks away while thinking she could never relax if the silver-haired heir came along. Avery wonders why this is happening as she reaches for a glass of wine. Her heart refuses to calm down while watching Aerys interact with the other noblemen nearby.
Standing alone on the balcony, Avery gazes up at the vast and shimmering starlit sky.
Avery's eyes widen in shock as a distant voice calls out for Rudo to let go.
Avery watches from the shadows as a blue-haired man firmly holds the brown-haired Lorenza's wrist.
A look of pure confusion fills Avery's face as she recognizes both Lorenza and Rupert.
Rupert tells Lorenza he will keep waiting, while she tells him not to get any ideas.
Avery remains hidden while witnessing the tense and private exchange between the two.
Narrative text reveals the blue-haired man is Rupert, Aerys' younger brother and youngest son of House Nosenleafs.
Avery recalls a grisly past-life memory of Rupert dying on the floor in a pool of blood.
A dark thought reflects that Avery Jaffa was the one who once stole this man's heart.
Avery realizes Rupert's hopeless one-sided love for her had already begun before he tried to kill her.
Rupert tells Lorenza that Aerys feels nothing for her and she screams for him to stop it.
Rupert notes that Aerys specifically gave Avery a white dress for the celebration tonight.
Avery looks back at her stunning white gown as the blue-haired man's words sink in.
Lorenza insists it cannot be true, while Rupert demands she finally admit the truth to herself.
A soft rustle sounds as the two continue to struggle against one another in the garden.
Lorenza turns and flees while Rupert calls out to her in a desperate and strained voice.
Avery pityingly reflects that Lorenza will only ever have eyes for the silver-haired Aerys.
Rupert coldly remarks that eavesdropping is not a very nice habit for a lady of her status.
A tense silence falls as Avery and the blue-haired man face each other under the moonlight.
Avery sips her wine while calmly stating she has no interest in their private drama. Rupert warns her not to tell his brother anything about what she just heard.
Avery looks him in the eye and simply promises that she will not speak of it.
Avery walks away while reflecting that she and Aerys have nothing to do with each other.
Avery resolves to forget Aerys entirely if she wants to live a life different from her last.
Avery looks away with a troubled expression while thinking of a man just like him.
A soft clink sounds as Avery leaves the blue-haired man alone near the garden gazebo.
Musical notes drift through the empty palace corridor as the party continues in the distance.
Avery walks through the shadows while her white dress glows under the dim palace lights.
Avery dismisses the idea of the dress's color, noting that Aerys and Lorenza are truly in love. Avery tries to convince herself that Aerys simply happened to pick the white dress by chance.
Avery gazes at a vision of the couple while concluding they are fated to be together regardless.
A rhythmic tap sounds as Avery walks away, wondering why Rupert thinks she would tell Aerys anything.
Avery thinks it would be bad if Aerys knew Rupert loved Lorenza, just as the heir appears.
Avery feels that getting any closer to the silver-haired man tonight would be far too dangerous.
Avery tells Aerys she is leaving, mockingly noting that clingy men are never very popular.
Avery resolves to leave the castle by tomorrow to start a new life far away from Aerys.
Avery asks the heir if her departure is something he would be quite happy about.
Aerys watches her retreating figure with a somber gaze while wishing her a quiet good day.
Avery continues walking as Aerys turns his back, the distance between them growing once again.
A heavy thud sounds as Aerys gasps for air,
desperately clutching his chest in sudden pain. Aerys leans against the wall while sweating profusely, feeling an intense and suffocating heat take over.
Aery stumbles into his room and throws off his cape while struggling to remain standing.
Aerys gasps for air as he desperately clutches his shirtless chest. Aerys collapses by the bed, sweating while gasping for his breath.
Beads of sweat cover Aerys' face as he struggles to breathe.
A declaration of love for Lorenza echoes through the dark void.
Aerys recalls a memory of himself hugging the brown-haired Lorenza.
Narrative text clarifies that Lorenza is only a precious childhood friend.
Aerys reflects that he has never truly been in love with her. The silver-haired man falls through the darkness in his formal uniform.
Aerys looks upward with an expression of intense dread and sweating. Aerys continues to fall horizontally through the silent and dark shadows.
Aerys notes that another version of himself whispers once to her.
Back in reality, Aerys sits on the floor, breathless and sweating. Aerys wonders when this strange physical reaction first began to happen.
Aerys reflects on the heat and tightness consuming his aching body.
Aerys concludes the feelings began when the blonde woman appeared. Sitting on the bed, Aerys stares intensely at a white handkerchief.
Aerys lies down while still clutching the delicate white lace item. Close-up of Aerys' sweating eyes as he sinks into a dream.
A peaceful blue sky signifies a shift in his sleeping consciousness.
A field of blue flowers represents a momentary and calm respite.
Aerys appears to be sleeping peacefully in a soft close-up shot.
A shimmering trail of white light cuts through the deep darkness.
Lorenza pleads for Aerys to stop while surrounded by thorny vines.
Aerys begs for the disturbing dream to finally stop its torment.
Avery tells Aerys she loves him while children laugh nearby.
A young boy strangles Aerys while expressing his deep, visceral disgust.
Two boys look down at Aerys with cruel and mocking smiles.
A dark and ominous command tells Aerys to die quickly.
Young Aerys gasps for air as hands tighten around his throat.
A cruel smile appears as a voice calls out his name.
Aerys lies awake in bed under the soft, early morning light.
The silver-haired man looks exhausted after his night of endless nightmares.
Aerys begs for the painful memories to finally leave him alone.
Aerys bolts upright in bed with a sudden and panicked shout.
Aerys asks how long he will keep seeing that moment in dreams.
A rhythmic knock sounds as Lynn asks if the marshal is awake.
Aerys stands by his bed while drinking a bottle of water.
Lynn enters the room as Aerys asks the guard what he wants.
Lynn explains that it is almost time to see Lady Shubarim off.
Aerys acknowledges the news and prepares to give a final gift.
Aerys holds out the lace handkerchief, instructing Lynn to get.
Lynn asks if Aerys will see her off, but Aerys refuses.
Avery stands outside wearing a layered purple and loose silk gown.
The blonde woman prepares to depart beside a large golden dragon.
Lynn calls out to Rifa as he approaches her in the fracken.
Avery turns with a bright smile at the black-haired guard's call.
Avery looks confused as she recognizes the item in her hand.
A memory shows Aerys watching Avery leave from a far distance.
Lynn explains that the marshal specifically asked him to get it.
Avery stares at the gift with a look of pure shock.
Philly mentions that the marshal will not be coming to see her off.
Avery stands by her golden dragon and simply acknowledges the news.
Avery clings to Philly while he speaks the dragon's name.
Soft light glimmers across the clouds in the afternoon sky.
Avery and Aerys travel by dragon toward the distant Imperial castle.
The massive stone walls of the Winstein Palace loom on high cliffs.
Aerys watches from a window as the golden dragon flies away.
A faint, lingering question echoes through the silent and empty room.
Aerys approaches the red sofa where the blonde woman sits waiting.
Avery wonders why she must keep seeing this man in her life.
Aerys reflects on the misfortune of being reunited with the lady once more. Avery recalls her mother teasing her about crossing paths with the man again.
Avery argues that their encounters are purely a result of their noble status. The Lady Duke of Grawl gently suggests that Avery should try to calm down.
Aerys and Avery exchange cold, silent glances while seated in the floral room.
Avery looks away, ignoring the man while surrounded by white lilies. The red-haired woman stands up and scolds them for ignoring everyone's presence.
The other heirs sit at a round table, witnessing the tense noble standoff.
The woman bows and asks the fifth prince to excuse their behavior.
Xian smiles at the Lady Duke of Grawl and tells her not to worry.
Xian thanks Aerys for his help while the silver-haired man bows in response.
Aerys asks the fifth prince why only the heirs have been summoned today. Xian requests their aid in securing the crown prince's seat during the Turtoret.
Avery looks surprised upon hearing about the upcoming hunting competition.
Narrative text explains the tournament is a major event for potential Imperial heirs. Winning the event allows a prince to consolidate power among the Duke's heirs.
Avery recalls the first prince winning the tournament in her previous timeline.
Xian looks determined as he admits he is asking for more than cooperation.
Xian explains that they must act before the day of the tournament.
The prince vows to weaken the first prince's forces as much as possible.
Xian looks Aerys directly in the eyes and asks for his assistance.
The red-haired lady addresses the fifth prince with a bright, cheerful shout.
The heirs of House Nosenleaf and Grawl watch the prince's bold declaration. The group of heirs stands together as they prepare for the political battle.
Cheyenne proclaims that together they will crush the First Prince's entire faction.
A carriage arrives at a grand estate in the capital under blue skies.
Narrative text explains they must investigate the nobles aligned with the First Prince.
The heirs are told to stay in townhouses until the tournament begins.
A shimmering chandelier hangs above as the plan takes an unexpected turn.
Avrifa and Aerys encounter each other unexpectedly at the entrance of a mansion. Avrifa looks shocked and demands to know why Aerys is at her home.
Aerys is equally stunned and asks why the lady is there to greet him. A pair of polished black shoes steps onto the brick walkway.
Philly introduces himself as Avrifa's personal butler and welcomes the heir.
Philly bows to Aerys while Avrifa looks on with total bewilderment.
Avrifa asks Philly why he is carrying bags as she returns home.
Philip presents a letter from her mother, much to Avrifa's sudden dread.
The blonde woman stares at the handwritten letter with a worried expression.
Her mother reveals Aerys' house is being renovated, forcing the pair together.
The letter concludes with a playful command for them to live like lovers.
Avrifa stares at a document with an expression of pure disbelief.
An internal scream of absolute denial echoes through the heavy silence.
Aerys explains his father provided the address while Avrifa questions him. Visions of the past loom as Aerys sighs during their confrontation.
Philly offers his apologies while standing before the blonde lady.
Avrifa sharply asks the brown-haired man if he is defying orders.
Philip politely clarifies he is acting on Duke Shubarum's direct instructions.
Aerys remains silent while looking at her with a heavy, troubled gaze.
Avrifa refuses to see him, but Aerys insists it is impossible.
A look of confusion crosses her face as she asks why.
Aerys explains they must investigate together regardless of their living arrangements.
Aerys concedes that her point about their separate lives is fair.
Aerys suggests focusing on the investigation while Avrifa agrees with him.
Aerys watches silently as Avrifa retreats inside with her loyal aide.
Tomorrow's undercover mission targets a slave auction run by the First Prince's ally.
Avery reflects on the mission's importance to protect the Divine Dukes.
Avrifa worries the First Prince will strip the Dukes of their power.
The special status of the Dukes is revealed as divine providence.
Avrifa's purple eyes narrow as she resolves to stop the usurpation.
A warning declares that divine punishment awaits those who steal power.
A quick click sounds as a gloved hand turns the handle.
Philly opens the door and urges Avrifa to get some rest.
Avrifa calls out to Philly as she prepares for a long night. The blonde woman stares ahead with a look of deep melancholy. Avrifa looks toward the sunset with a sense of impending duty.
Philly bows deeply and excuses himself from the quiet sitting room.
Avery realizes joining forces with Aerys is her only viable option.
Invitations are checked as masked guests arrive at the secretive mansion.
Mask Avrifa notes the strict security while Aerys confirms the plan.
A noble dreams of finding a submissive partner at the auction. The man desires a woman who will serve his every whim.
Shadows loom as a couple walks down a dark, secluded corridor. Aerys and Avrifa suddenly ambush the pair from the dark shadows. Aerys plans to interrogate the unconscious nobles once they finally wait.
Avrifa tells her companions to stay put while they proceed inside.
A servant welcomes the newcomers and asks for their identification.
Avrifa introduces herself as Rinbel while holding onto the silver-haired man. The servant blushes while repeating her alias with a stuttering voice.
The pair enters the grand auction hall through a red-carpeted corridor.
Avrifa explains she is simply acting her part to remain unnoticed.
Aerys sighs and tells her they need to focus on the mission. Winning the highest bid is the only way to meet Marquis Yezer.
The auctioneer welcomes the mass crowd under a bright, harsh spotlight.
I am unable to read that text. Aerys and Avrifa sit among the nobles with looks of disgust. The first captive is brought out while the auctioneer gestures grandly.
The bidding escalates rapidly until a final gavel strike seals the sale.
Avrifa tells Aerys she will place the winning bid eventually.
Aerys asks when the right time is while Avrifa watches closely.
The main attraction is announced as a hand reaches into view.
The first captive girl stands bound on the auction stage. Avrifa watches the auction intently from her seat in the crowd.
Aerys leans in to whisper a question during the bidding.
Avrifa watches as the bidding reaches 10 million for the slave.
Avrifa shocks the entire room by bidding 100 million.
A sudden, heavy silence falls over the grand auction hall. Avrifa confidently repeats her massive bid to the stunned audience.
Avrifa stands tall while holding her winning bid number paddle.
Applause erupts as the auctioneer confirms the record-breaking purchase price.
Aerys worries they've attracted far too much attention with the bid.
The masked noble walks down a red-carpeted hall after the auction.
A guard stands watch outside the Marquise's private double doors.
Aerys and Avrifa wait together inside the dimly lit private office.
The Marquis welcomes them, but explains the chief supervisor is absent.
Avrifa looks at the man, recognizing him as the target noble.
Narrative text confirms the man is the powerful Marquis Yezer.
Avrifa observes the Marquis's calm and composed facial expression.
Avrifa concludes the Marquis is highly experienced in illegal slave deals.
The Marquis requests that they fill out the contract immediately.
Avrifa mentions a recently executed slaver to pressure the corrupt official.
Everyfa warns that anyone could be targeted for crimes text.
A hand uses a quill to sign the official paperwork.
Averyfa continues her psychological pressure while sitting beside Aerys.
The Marquise asks for a signature to certify the real name. Aerys interrupts the process to request a binding blood contract instead.
Narrator explains that Xion's magic can authenticate names via blood samples.
The pair watches the Marquis, waiting tensely for his reaction.
Aerys asks the Marquis why he has suddenly become so silent.
Aerys offers 200 million to further entice the hesitant man.
Aerys explains that half of the massive bid is a brag.
Aerys tells him to simply provide a single drop of blood. Aerys asserts that his offer is too tempting to possibly refuse.
The Marquis finally agrees and prepares to prick his hinder.
Avrifa reflects on how easily greed blinded the foolish man.
Avery deems the Marquis a truly pitiful and greedy person. The scene shifts to the Grand Imperial Palace during the day. A noble expresses amazement at how quickly they gathered proof.
The group confirms they have secured enough evidence for the Emperor.
The 5 heirs stand united before their meeting with the crown.
A golden chandelier shines brightly within the Imperial Palace Hall.
The blonde prince presents the party before the seated emperor.
Emperor Dolutlock Rutik Tutula D. Winstein demands their business.
The blonde prince explains they are submitting proof of corruption.
They confirm that the heirs have successfully obtained evidence of crimes. Xion bows while asking to report his specific findings officially.
Evidence reveals illegal slave arenas, narcotics trade, and secret brothels.
Xion confirms that every heir has successfully secured critical evidence. Xion prepares to reveal the most important piece of legal proof.
Xion presents the blood contract bearing the corrupt Marquise's aim.
Xion requests to verify the blood sample with his divine magic.
The blonde heir and green-haired man watch with worried expressions.
The Emperor shouts for the first prince and his aides immediately.
Narrative boxes explain they were barred from the palace despite Xion's magic.
A voice anticipates seeing what happens to the first prince tomorrow.
Avrifa and Aerys discuss how their plan benefits the fifth prince.
Avrifa wonders why she feels so calm sharing a meal with him.
Aerys asks why she isn't eating while she reflects on their past.
The blonde woman notes how natural sitting across from him feels.
A soft, quick tap sounds against the large wooden double doors.
Avrifa asks who it is as a servant enters the room.
The aide presents a sparkling letter sent by the fifth prince.
The fifth prince writes a letter thanking them for their dedicated efforts.
The letter reveals the first prince narrowly kept his right of succession.
Aerys claims that acknowledging the corruption is still a major historical victory. Averyfa looks down at her plate and concedes that he is right.
Averyfa asks Philly for wine while Aerys tries to caution her.
The silver-haired man looks slightly unwell while sitting in his formal suit.
Aerys remains silent as the blonde woman stares at him across dinner.
Dark red wine pours steadily into a clear glass under the light.
Averyfa smiles and challenges Aerys to a drinking contest between them.
Aerys begins to refuse the challenge with a polite wave of his hand. Aerys suddenly collapses with a pained groan while Philly shouts in alarm.
Averyfa looks on in total shock as she calls out his name.
Avrifa trembles, realizing this medical crisis never happened in her previous life.
The blonde woman hears a faint, labored breath while looking absolutely horrified. Philly supports the collapsed man and leaves to find urgent medical aid.
Avrifa orders the staff to take Aerys to his private room immediately.
The brown-haired aide acknowledges the command with a sharp, respectful shout.
Servants rush to carry the unconscious man away from the dining table.
Avrifa stands alone, paralyzed by confusion over the sudden turn of events.
Aerys lies motionless in bed while his labored breathing continues through sleep.
The doctor reports that the cause of the illness remains completely unknown.
Avrifa looks down with a grim expression as she acknowledges the news.
The old doctor clears his throat before offering a strange theoretical conjecture.
The doctor suggests that Aerys may have been targeted by a curse.
Avrifa's purple eyes narrow as she repeats the word with deep suspicion.
Avrifa dismisses the idea of a curse while sensing something far darker. A vision recalls her past prayer for Aerys to suffer eternal torment. Avrifa worries that the gods may have actually granted her vengeful wish.
Narrative text asks if Aerys is destined to suffer for his lifetime. Avrifa realizes that her own presence proves that impossible wishes can happen.
The blonde woman looks at her reflection while recalling her first life. Avrifa remembers living the second life with her old memories fully intact.
Avrifa clutches her chest, realizing his agony isn't what she truly wanted.
Philip enters and asks the milady if something is bothering her mind. Avrifa regains her composure and tells Philly to properly thank the doctor. The aide leads the old doctor out of the quiet, darkened room.
Philly tells the maid they will leave the two nobles alone now.
Avrifa sits by the bed and watches the silver-haired man sleep fitfully.
A gloved hand reaches out to touch his face in the silence.
Avrifa touches Aerys' face, noting how cold his skin feels, comparing it to his divine magic.
The blonde woman calls out to the silver-haired man as he remains unconscious in the bed.
Avrifa recalls wishing for him to suffer after her death in her previous life.
Avrifa admits she feels satisfied seeing him in pain, acknowledging her own wicked nature. The noblewoman stands beside the bed and questions if she should truly be happy.
Averyfa begins to cry, realizing that seeing his agony brings her no genuine happiness at all.
A single glistening tear falls and lands upon the man's sleeping face.
Averyfa wipes her eyes while wondering why she is crying for the man.
A hand reaches out to firmly grasp hers in the choir room.
Averyfa's eyes widen in total shock as she realizes the man has suddenly awakened.
Aerys looks up from his pillow and asks the blonde woman why she is crying.
Averyfa pulls back and coldly tells him that a man like him should just die.
Aerys smiles weakly while lying in bed and insists he cannot afford to die yet.
Ares explains he has far too much to do while Averyfa looks on with surprise.
The silver-haired man gazes gently at the blonde woman as a tense silence follows.
Aerys groans in pain as he tries to sit up, causing Averyfa to shout in alarm.
Averyfa supports the man while questioning his health, and he offers a quiet apology.
Avery fasts and tells him to stay in bed while stating she's leaving. Aerys looks at her with a tired expression and asks her to stay with him.
Averyfa stops in her tracks and turns back with a look of pure confusion.
Aerys turns onto his side and repeats his request for her to stay right there. The blonde woman stares at him in silence as he settles back into the bed.
Averyfa sits back down and tells him she will stay for a little while longer. Averyfa watches his back, wondering if she has ever observed him so quietly before.
She listens to his breathing and questions if she has ever appreciated his peace.
Averyfa tells herself these feelings are wrong and that she mustn't soften toward him again.
The noblewoman remains sitting by the bed while the silver-haired man sleeps. First Prince Raphael curses the fifth prince while furiously slamming his hands onto his desk.
His wife, Hedvika, enters the room and pleads with the angry prince to calm down.
Raphael throws a book and shouts at his wife for daring to give him any orders.
The red-haired prince calls her useless while the pink-haired woman apologizes from the floor.
Raphael huffs in frustration while his wife stands trembling behind him in the shadows.
The first prince turns back with a smirk, claiming he was wrong about her earlier.
The prince firmly plants his foot down on a scattered piece of pita.
Hedvika looks at her husband with confusion, asking him to clarify what he means.
The prince grabs a lock of her hair and calls her his beloved wife.
Raphael asks her to do something for him, while the woman nervously asks for details.
The first prince orders his wife to successfully win over Lady Shubram to their fact.
Raphael dismisses Averyfa as a foolish villainess while Hedvika expresses concern over the task. Hedvika considers the rumors of Averyfa's change but remains convinced of her terrifying core.
The consort doubts she can ever recruit Averyfa while fearing the woman's true nature.
Raphael grabs his wife's shoulders and aggressively insists that she will complete the task.
The prince whispers that she must make him happy, falsely claiming he loves her.
A relentless rain falls over the darkened landscape of the palace grounds.
Averyfa looks out the window, feeling uneasy when Philly approaches to find her. Philly presents a letter from the first prince's consort, shocking the wary blonde woman.
Averyfa reflects on having no history with the first prince's wife in her previous life.
Averyfa takes the letter, certain that it is the source of her unease.
The noblewoman stands under the light as she prepares to open the scroll.
Averyfa looks at the contents and realizes she has been invited to a tea party.
Averyfa questions the first prince's motive for sending a sudden invitation to his enemies. Philly asks about her next move, but she calmly reassures him that there is no need for worry.
Averyfa gazes at her reflection, certain everything will turn out fine.